Just as the Enoweans had regrouped, so were the humans sauntering back to their own ship. They'd almost reached the halfway point when they suddenly heard a loud, bear-like screech. "Hey, did you guys hear that too?" Marshall asked. It had come from around the corner and was accompanied by the pitter-patter of what sounded like roughly 24 anxious Muppets. The four of them slowed down and looked back only to see a crowd of determinant Teddy Ruxpins rushing towards them. They were covered in some sort of dark blue liquid while wildly flailing flashlights. Or at least they assumed those things were flashlight right up until one of them aimed it at Jeremiah's posterior and burned a hole right through his suit. "Ouch! Oh, heavens!" he yammered as the photon riffle left him with a rather nasty-looking second-degree burn. At which point the humans turned around and began to run as hard as they could. "Don't worry, kid," Marshall said. "I can easily fix that once we get back to the The doctor ducked right as a beam was about to hit the back of his head. "So with that in mind, be sure to shield my body with your own." With the Enoweans hot on their trail, the humans continued to run through the bowels of the ship. Due to the lights being off and the fact that bolts of colored light kept flashing past their heads, the situation almost reminded them of a rave. Or at least it did right up until someone got hit and the smell conjured up the mental images of a barbecue. Clark was pretty sure he saw Stella lick her lips last time Jeremiah got hit and hoped to God she was just Scratch that. Both scenarios had him pray internally for Jer's immortal soul. Luckily for the humans, it appears that while desperation and fear are great motivators, those can only get you so far when your adversary has a body much more proficient in regards to endurance running, and that's already discounting the fact that human, on average, have somewhat longer legs. "Oh, gods, how are they still going?" one of the exhausted Enoweans tried to say while coughing and wheezing heavily. "It's like they're, magical?" another one added. "Of course," Captain Ekalos remarked. "They're near their cradle world. Their goddess is obviously empowering them with her vile soul magic. But don't worry, we'll catch up with them eventually. All we have to do is bless these hallways," he said while smearing some of the blood staining his fur onto the walls. "And sooner or later there will be nowhere left for them to run." "I can't believe I'm actually about to do this," Reka murmured to herself. The flood of her own kinsmen had swept her up, and she'd been carried to the aforementioned supply closet, Blanket Fort, a.k.a. the Cuddle Hut. Luckily for her, she'd managed to pretend she had been with them all along so as to not attract any suspicion. Afterwards, when they'd decided to go out and attempt suicide by Gaian, she'd volunteered to stay back and take care of, what was your name again? Pained grunts and groans emanated from the weakened, frail heap of Enowean that was laying in front of her. "I think I'll just refer to you as my patient, then, if that's all right with you." Reka hadn't been the only one to volunteer, but luckily, as soon as she'd reminded them about him possibly turning into a Gaian, or that perhaps he was contagious, everyone else suddenly seemed pretty okay with letting her handle this one all by herself. "Now then, I hope you're in the mood for a small adventure, 'cause my conscience won't allow me to just let you die here like this. I doubt killing one of them, if that's even possible, will do much good, so with that in mind, I've thought of an equally desperate yet slightly less suicidal plan. Believe it or not, but I'm actually on somewhat good terms with one of the Gaians, and from what I can tell, I don't think they're all that bad. So what if I just brought you to them? Maybe they'll know how to fix this. Of course, if all else fails and you begin to transform, you'll at least be with your own kind. Or get a quick death." That last part she whispered softly under her breath. Wouldn't that be better than just wasting away and dying a slow and agonizing death? Galeth let out another pained groan. "Great, it's settled then," she said before letting out a loud, strenuous huff and lifting him on the stretcher she'd grabbed while everyone else was gathering blood bags. "Just hold on tight and everything will be all right before you know it, I promise." She pushed the floating slab of metal onto the hallway in what she assumed was the right direction. "Gods, I hope I'm right about this," she thought to herself. Within the Church of the Great Alliance, there's a wide variety of conflicting theories in regards to the afterlife. For example, some believe in reincarnation, others think there's some kind of heavenly golden meadow, and a small minority believes that death is something that only happens to other people, right up until fate decides otherwise, of course. Keeping all of this in mind, Reika was pretty sure that what she was doing now might get her disbarred from any and all post-mortal events, occasions, and celebrations. Not that she ever particularly cared what the gods might think of her, of course, although that being said, perhaps it would be more accurate to say that she'd never considered herself noteworthy of their attention, and therefore scrutiny, in the first place. That is, of course, disqualifying this precise moment wherein she was sure that they were all watching her, wearing matching jerseys and loudly screaming at her like an enraged sports fan might when one of their home team's athlete is about to score a point for the opposing team. She could almost imagine some of them waving flags, holding up banners and blowing air horns while yelling profanities at her. At the very least, it'd match how she was feeling right about now. She felt guilty, traitorous, and most of all, evil. No. She shook her head and tried to collect her thoughts. I won't let my fears control me and override my sense of reason. Gods be damned. I was blessed with sapience, so now watch me use it. With her spirit revitalized and renewed conviction, the young Enowayan bravely ran down the hall in search for help, in search for the Gaians. Clark and his fellow humans were walking through the darkened halls of the ship in search for the exit. Well, technically, in a spaceship, anything can be an exit as long as you've got a sufficiently powerful weapon and a head as empty as space itself. Therefore, it'd be more accurate to state that they were looking for their very specific circumstantial visitation and emergency assistance hole. The legal suits had vigorously insisted that they carefully refer to such diplomatically sensitive scenarios using jargon pulled from a very limited and predefined list of words, or that they at the very least mind their volume when nearby anyone donning a tie as opposed to the company-mandated scowl, especially if they suspect said person has a law degree and an aversion to garlic. If it hadn't been for the army of moldy monchichis, they'd been back already. Navigating through a darkened ship is already hard enough without getting shot at by alien bear creatures drenched in their own blood. Granted, non-lethally, of course, but no one felt particularly inspired to stop and investigate whether said assumption was 100% correct. And thus, in their haste, our humans managed to take a couple wrong rights when they left the Enowayans in the dust. Are they still behind us? Stella asked in between loud gasps, too tired to even look behind her. We lost them about 5 minutes ago, I think, Clark responded. Wait, what do you mean 5 minutes ago? Then why the fuck are we still running? I feel like I'm about to drop dead any second. Well, began Marshall. No one wants to get left behind. That and adrenaline is one hell of a drug. I should know. I always bring extra. Oh, and Jeremiah's still running because he's an intern and no one has ordered him not to yet. Not true. I just figured that we'd boop. Ooh, shit! Jeremiah yelled while weaving to the side. He just barely managed to avoid colliding with 2 Enowayans coming from an adjacent hallway, followed by Marshall dryly remarking, All right, you can stop now. The humans who'd already begun to trail behind the muscled ex-farmhand all slowed down before stopping in front of the Enowayans. One of the 2 aliens stared at the humans like a deer caught in headlights, while the other looked a lot less fresh. Wait a minute, Clark thought to himself as he appeared to recognize the Enowayan pushing the futuristic-looking stretcher. It didn't take long for his suspicion to be confirmed as the Enowayan's expression seemed to turn from sudden fright to nervous relief. She frantically began to point at the 4 of them, and then at the poor, sickly-looking alien, more specifically at a tiny cut on his arm. I think it wants us to help its friend, Clark pondered aloud. Maybe we should, Stella gasped. Oh, you, my whittle baby has an ouchie, and now my brain has an aneurysm. Marshall huffed sarcastically. Hold on, Clark perked up and turned to Stella, who was fidgeting guiltily. Did you do this? Did you touch something again? You know what happens when you do that. I'm not sure. I guess I may have felt one of them accidentally brush against my finger when you and Jeremiah were trying to stop me from adopting one, she muttered dejectedly. Gosh darn it! If only we'd been faster. We should have expected her to try and grab one, Jeremiah added. This is the petting zoo incident all over again. Only difference is that Clark hasn't drop-kicked anyone yet. Whatever, let's just drop it, Clark remarked. Whatever ancient curse is affecting Stella can wait. Now we gotta... Marshall stared at him with an expression of mock annoyance before interrupting. As usual, force our oh-so-benevolent and respectable doctor to take care of this poor creature? Why, of course, after all, it's my duty as a vet. Errand of medical school to save as many lives as I can. Marshall laughed nervously, while the others were sarcastically staring at him as if to say, "Yeah, sure, buddy." On top of that, Marshall was pretty sure he saw Jeremiah sneakily slip Clark $20. "Now then, I'd hate to be the bearer of bad news, but aren't we forgetting something?" Stella remarked. "Because doctor or not, I doubt there's a whole lot we'll be able to do unless we find our way back to our ship quickly." "I take it we can't rely on Stella's womanly intuition or Jeremiah's powerful sense of smell either, can we?" Marshall asked. "Wait, guys, look. I think our new friend here might know the way." Clark yelled excitedly while pointing at the Enowean, who was now briskly jogging down the hallway before quickly stopping and beckoning them to hurry up already. "Let's just hope we don't come to regret this," Marshall muttered.